This is a short PowerPoint presentation dealing with one of the more frequent questions I receive from graduate students and recent graduates, which is, how do I get work or how do I make money in IO psychology or HR consulting? And that's a very natural question. Some individuals want to go and set up their own shingle or practice as a single or individual practitioner, and so they want to know, how do I get work? Or you might be going to work for a consulting firm, and you might think, hey, during the interview, the consulting firm is going to say, well, how do you bring work into this consulting firm? How do you pay for your salary? So in this short presentation, I'm going to go over some of my thoughts with regard to how you actually go about securing work, finding clients, getting paid for consulting work you do in IO psychology. How do you get paid for your expertise? So how do you get work? Well, there's a lot of different ways you might try to get work, or let's put it another way, companies might select you to do work for them, or you might hook up with clients or companies or organizations or public sector agencies. One way, of course, is networking. You can always use networking. You can reach out to people you went to school with. You can, whether it's graduate school, college, high school, you can get active in the community. You can get active in PSYOP, or you can go to conferences, or you can go to SHRM conferences, or you can get on various social media outlets. So there's a lot of different ways to network, and of course you can get work through networking. Another way to get work is just location. Sometimes an organization, a company, a jurisdiction just wants somebody who's close to them, who's in the same location. If the company's in Cleveland, Ohio, they want a consultant in Cleveland, Ohio. If the company's in Omaha, Nebraska, they want a consultant who's located in Omaha, Nebraska. So sometimes location may get you the work. I know, having been at a university for a long time, a lot of times companies, organizations will call the local university, thinking if I call the local university will know someone or will have someone there who can provide services to me. Being the cheapest, if you want to price yourself really low or even work for free, you can probably get work. You can get work from at least clients who want to get something done for the cheapest possible price. So working very inexpensively or cheap is always a way to get work. Uh, Being the first. In the old days in phone books, people used to try to name themselves A, whatever, to try to be the first listing in the phone book. If you're Companies often may just call one person. The first person they call, that's the person they're going to go with. So if you can be the first, however you become the first, that's another way to get work. Being the best. Being the best helps. There's some organizations that see themselves as the best in their product area or their segment, and they want to work with the best. They want to work with the best consultant out there. And so they'll reach out and try to determine who's the best consultant, and they'll work with the person they see as the best. Sales. Sales is another way to get work. If you can hire salespeople, or you can at least hire part of a salesperson, or you can try to do sales yourself. You can go out and play golf with people, take people to dinner, give them little products with your names on it. You can have salespeople who do that. Of course, with working with government, there's lobbyists who you can hire who can try to get work for you. So you can get work through sales or lobbyists. Another way to get work is being a minority or a small business. Often you have to register for this, but there are both public sector agencies and private sector agencies that do set-asides, where a certain amount of work is set aside for minority or small businesses. So by getting registered as a minority or a small business, you can get work for yourself. But probably the way a lot of consultants get work today is by responding to RFPs. This was probably less common 40 years ago or even 20 years ago, but today a lot of both private sector and public sector companies, or agencies, organizations use requests for proposals or responses to requests for proposals to award work. So by writing up responses to requests for proposals and then having your proposals selected, you can get work. Of course, sometimes these responses to these RFPs are very short, but sometimes they're very long. They can run several hundred pages, especially if there's a lot of what would be called boilerplate. So responding to RFPs can take a lot of time. If you're going to be a consultant and you want to respond to RFPs, you need to set aside time to respond to RFPs. There's a number of different kinds of RFPs. There's the requests for information. This is where companies are looking for information or maybe even help writing up an RFP. So they know very little about what they're looking for. And really at this point, they just want information, maybe information on what vendors are out there, how many vendors are out there, what the consultants do. And so they issue a request for an information. Another type of RFP is the request for quotation. Here, probably the company knows really what it wants. It wants 100 pads of paper. And so the focus is on price, not really information about what you could do for them. And so they know what they want done. They just want a price. That's pretty straightforward. But normally we're dealing with what's called a request for proposals or an RFP. When dealing with an RFP or request for proposals, the organization or the agency is usually evaluating many factors, only one of those factors being price. They often have very specific questions and a lot of different questions. And some of those questions may be, what's your experience in this area? How do you propose to do this? How long will it take you to do it? Are there any unique things you can do? Can you do all these specific things? So they often have a lot of very specific questions, and they're looking for a lot of different kinds of information on the consultants or the vendors. As a matter of fact, the price may be only a secondary or not even a secondary consideration. The main considerations may be things like who's the best out there or who can do the best job for me. So price may be a lesser consideration when responding to an RFP, or at least when the organization is selecting the vendors to be awarded the work based on their responses to the RFP. In terms of responding to RFPs, my advice would be, one, keep it simple. The simpler your response, I think, the better. It can be tempting for some of you who are coming out of graduate school or academics to prepare really academic, technical language responses. I think normally organizations don't really want to see that. They do want to see that you have expertise, but they don't necessarily want to see a technical paper or a journal submission. Answer the questions. They're usually going to have questions. They want to see you answer those questions. Indicate that you will do what they are asking you to do. So normally they're going to have, again, the series of questions or series of tasks that they want done and series of products that they want to receive. And so you want to tell them, one, you'll do the tasks that they're asking you to do, and two, that you can provide the products that they want. And then tailor their response to your questions. I see some even large consultants that tend to respond to RFPs with just boilerplate. And often their responses aren't then responsive to the questions that are asked. They're not really answering the specific questions that are asked. So make sure you're answering the questions, and make sure you're tailoring your response to what that organization actually is asking you and what that organization needs. Okay, once the agency or the organization gets the responses to RFPs, they then narrow them down. How exactly they go about narrowing those responses down is sort of an unknown. I mean, my guess is sometimes they may just do it holistically. They may just say, well, let's look at these and rank them, or hey, which one do you think is the best? Sometimes they may come up with some sort of scoring rubric. Other times you'll see they actually, in the RFP, have a specific point system. So the RFP will actually tell you, you're going to get 20 points for past experience. you're going to get 10 points for location. You're going to get 10 points for minority business representation. You're going to get 20 points for cost. You're going to get 20 points for being able to do it quickly. I don't know how many points that adds up to, but some organizations actually have point systems. They'll even tell you what the point system is, and they use those point systems to then rate or rank the responses to the RFP. Of course, it's probably rare to get work just based on the RFP. Normally, a company or organization or even a public sector agency will use the responses to narrow down the number of vendors or consultants they're considering, and then they'll bring those consultants in for either oral interview, maybe a board interview, or they'll ask the consultants come in and ask them to do some kind of presentation to a board. So it's sort of rare you get a reward at the contract just based on your response to the RFP. Normally there's a second stage once the organizations have been narrowed down. Okay, different kinds of projects. There's a lot of different kinds of projects or ways to cost out projects or ways to do projects. Of course, you could do projects for free. Probably can't do that very long unless you're very wealthy. Another kind of project is the fixed price project. You agree to do the project for a certain total amount. So you say, I'm going to do this, I'll do this project for 20,000, or I'll do this project for 30,000. The one problem with fixed price is you can, of course, lose money on fixed price projects. It can cost you more to do the project than you're going to be paid for the project. That's especially true, I think, when fixed price projects include travel and expenses, because your travel and expenses can get very costly. So you do have to watch it with fixed price projects because sometimes you can end up losing money or losing your business because it costs you more to do the fixed price project than you're going to get paid. Hourly projects. The hourly project is simple enough. You say, I'm going to charge you so much an hour, $100 an hour, and you just bill the client $100 for every hour you work. So it's a simple, I'm charging you for the hours I work. Hourly up to a fixed amount. This is sort of a combination of hourly and fixed price. You're saying, I'm going to do the fixed price, and I'm going to do hourly. I'm going to bill you for the hours I work, but I'll only do that up to some fixed amount. So if I work less than the fixed amount, I'll only be billing you for those hours. If I go over the fixed amount, I'm going to stop. Of course, that probably has the disadvantages of the fixed price type of approach and that you can end up losing money. Subscriptions. This is a newer approach, but you see it a lot from consulting firms. I guess you could argue it's similar to paying a retainer. The organization pays you a certain amount each month, and then, or each year, each quarter, whatever it may be, and you just do work and they've paid for a subscription. You probably normally see this more with companies that are providing testing services, but a subscription approach where you're getting a certain standard amount each month. Percentage of growth or profits, now we're sort of talking somewhat more ambitious approaches, I guess, but you could agree to do your work in exchange. You could say, hey, this work is going to make money for the company, so I'm willing to take for my work a percentage of the growth or profits that the company experiences. Stocks or other corporate share. I'm missing an S there, but stocks or other corporate share. So with this approach, you do work in exchange for the company awarding you stocks or some type of share of the company. Ethical issues. I think we should talk about ethical issues if you're going to go out there consulting. Remember, you can do harm. I mean, I think consultants in industrial organizational psychology and HR consulting can, in fact, do harm. You could select the wrong person, and that person could end up causing problems for the company. You could end up with race or sex discrimination or sexual harassment claims. Your employees could get injured. Other people could get injured. So there's different kinds of harm you could do. So you have to think about that as you're going into projects. You could certainly end up in litigation, various kinds of litigation related to what we said before about doing harm. There's also a trend in agreements towards including indemnification agreements. I don't really like indemnification agreements myself, or I think, hey, if the company wants me to indemnify them, I should be indemnifying, they should be indemnifying me as well. Now you're probably saying, what's an indemnification agreement? An indemnification agreement is basically an agreement that if something goes wrong with the project, you're going to take all the costs and blame. You're going to be responsible for all the litigation costs, any awards, any costs the company has. So you're basically taking on all the responsibility if something goes wrong. Okay. In terms of back to ethical issues, though, I think, again, with consulting, most of the common ethical issues actually involve either healthcare professionals moving into, involve healthcare professionals moving into consulting psychology. And under that, I could say that it probably involves the common ones are practicing outside your area of competency or mixing a clinical and consulting practice. And the third would be the question that comes up as to who is your client. Usually, again, in IO psychology consulting work, your client's going to be the organization, not the person you're working with. But that can, of course, create some conflicts. Okay, proving value. I've had people before when I've given this talk ask, well, what if the company asks you to prove that what you're going to do has value to them? I actually don't think this is as common as you might think. I think companies often know, I want this done. There's tasks I want accomplished or a product that I want. And so they already know that product has value to them. You don't have to prove the value of that product to them. But in those cases where you can, certainly you can turn to utility analysis. There's a lot of books and guides out there on utility analysis. The use of various kinds of metrics are very common these days, and of course, are even dashboards. There's books, guides. You could seek help with creating dashboards, metrics, etc. I do think, again, if you look at the trends today, most consultants are keeping it simple, though. They're often saying, we'll look at value in terms of very simple things. Increases in ratings on surveys, increased employee satisfaction, or probably the big one is often decreased turnover. Also, of course, I don't think, managers and most managers, at least, don't expect you to talk like an accountant. So they don't expect you to go in there and be an accountant breaking things down by dollar for every single task and every single outcome. Again, I think in most cases, they already know that they want this product. So proving the value of the product to them is not the issue. Need and gap. Usually this is the simplest way to prove value. The company usually has a clear need or a clear gap between where they'd like to be and where they are now. And so your value is in reducing that gap, reducing that gap or reducing that need, reducing the gap between where they are now and where they want to be. And of course, a lot of your value is from being able to do what you say you're going to do in both a timely and cost-effective fashion. Okay, I think, again, when you're starting out, and you're maybe doing an RFP, one of the most difficult things is, well, how do I determine what a project is going to cost? As you develop more experience, you sort of have in your head that certain projects are going to cost a certain amount. Doing a survey is going to cost this much. Doing a job analysis is going to cost this much. Doing a test development is going to cost this much. But when you're first starting out, or even when you're doing a response to your RFP, you often need to break it out. And so, that's a pretty basic process. You want to break out what are the tasks or activities that you're going to have to do. And then for each task or activity, how long is it going to take you? And then once you know the time, if you know what you're going to charge for your time, it's easy to convert that into cost. So you have to come up with time for various activities. This is just sort of a sampling that I often give. I think writing a simple report probably takes at least 8 hours. Complex report writing, 40 to 100 hours. Writing a test, a knowledge test, probably takes at least an hour per item. Writing a personality test takes about 30 minutes per item. Statistical analysis can vary, but I think often it seems to take around 8 hours. But a lot of your time in statistical analysis is often not in calculating the statistics, but in just basic cleaning up of the data. And then job analysis. I think, a job analysis write-up is often probably 8 to 16 hours. And then you can say, well, how many interviews am I going to do? How long is it going to take to do each interview? If I'm going to develop a questionnaire, how long will it take me to develop that questionnaire? How long will it take me to score the questionnaire? How long will it take me to write up the results? So it's just a matter of breaking out the activities you want to do, and then how much time it's going to take for each activity. And then, of course, once you do that, then your cost is going to depend upon your hourly rate. And here, hourly rates can be all over the place. I said before, you can try to be the cheapest. Maybe you work for 50 bucks an hour. Again, if you're working for 50 bucks an hour and you can work 2,000 hours a year, that's $100,000, which isn't bad, but you're going to have a lot, you have to cover sort of your expenses of running your office and running your practice. So you're not going to net to 100,000, but and probably very few people out there charge $50 an hour. If you charge $100 an hour, that's 200,000 a year if you can actually be what's called green or working for all 2,000 hours, which it's probably very rare that you're going to actually be able to work or bill for 2,000 hours a year. But if you want to bill $100 an hour, I think probably commonly rates for consulting run anywhere from $150 to $1,000 an hour. I realize that's a big range. It probably depends where you live, who your clients are, what services you're delivering, how you want to value yourself, how you want to compete. But probably, the range, and I know it's a really big range, is probably $150 to $1,000 an hour. Anyway, that's the end of my brief presentation. Please thank you for listening. If you have questions, you can always email those questions to me at DennisDoverspike@Doverspikeconsulting.com, and I'll try to answer any questions you might have. Or you can try to reach me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all those various different social media outlets. So please, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And thank you for watching this short PowerPoint presentation.